Good morning and welcome to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. And now, Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
I'm Kyle Zander. Scott, how are things going?
Great. Great in terms of, when we look at this beautiful fall that we're starting to experience, and, very frankly, I don't know if people have been out driving this week, but boy, look at the sumac and some of the other plants, that are creating the fall colors are absolutely wonderful. Not so great when we look at the markets. My gosh, what a week we have had.
What is going on?
Well, you've probably been tuning in, and there's to a lot of what the prognosticators and others are saying. It can be anything from the fear of a double-dip recession to all of the fears that are, really triggered out of what's going on in Europe relative to downgrading the different nations' ability to pay, and Greece keeps coming up in the press relative to whether or not they're going to be able to manage theirs. But the bigger ones, of course, now are if they start looking at Italy and then and how that's going to affect the other European nations. That's really a big deal.
The guest for today is Jim Jensen. I believe we'll get to him in a little bit, but if you have any advice for investors with the market being pretty volatile again this week, what would that be?
Well, and Kyle, I think you know this. For the last 3 weeks, we've had shows that have either been directly talking about putting defense in your portfolio, or we've added that on because this is an important thing for people to really consider, and they don't always pay enough attention to it. So we want to make sure that that they pay attention, because I think when I worry about people in these situations, I worry about a couple different groups. First of all, people that have got 401ks and they've got savings and they go on day to day, but they don't pay any attention to it, and the consequence is they don't really know what they're invested in, and they may not have the defense in their portfolio that they really need. So that's one group, and so the theme there, of course, is pay attention and start to create some defense. The other folks that I worry about are, those that are a little, honestly, overly optimistic. Those that get into a position where they're like, well, I like to take risk because risk always pays off for me. And you know what? I appreciate that point of view, but if you are in a situation where you're going to be using that money, so one of the things that I'm encouraging people to do today is to take a look at how long until they're going to be using certain buckets of money. And of course, when we establish a retirement plan for people, we really set out for them how much they should have in cash reserve, how much they should have in an income bucket, how much they should have in their growth bucket, and making sure that those buckets are set up appropriate so that they don't have to draw on a growth bucket when growth buckets might be down. That's going to be a really big thing. So how long until you're going to use the money? Do you have enough cash reserve? And really, it's not a bad idea to do some scenarios that include some pretty, unhappy investment returns, so that you say, can I make it if, in fact, we get poor investment returns over the next 4 or 5 years if the markets don't cooperate with us? And then that's part of how you go about establishing good defense into your overall portfolio. So I'd say, because we had this week, we lost about 6% in the stock market this week. That's substantial. That's one of the worst weeks that we've, frankly, ever had. It's not there's worse. There's definitely worse. But this has not been a good week. And people are not invested for the week, I understand. On the same hand, is we're going to probably have more volatility ahead of us. So I really highly encourage people to take some steps, call their financial advisor, call us. We'll be happy to, sit down with folks and evaluate what their portfolio looks like and evaluate whether or not they have enough defense in the portfolio. That's why we've been emphasizing it these last 3 weeks, because it is so important. And people who, there are those that are out there that say, well, mine is too small. It's really, it's not a great big portfolio, so I don't know that I should really go see a financial advisor about it. And here's my encouragement. Absolutely pick up the phone and make that phone call. When it is small, it needs more care. The fact of the matter is those with very large portfolios can often experience a setback and not be harmed by it. Those that have the smaller portfolios have to watch them actually more carefully. So I would say pick up the phone, give us a call, and we'd be more than happy to sit down with folks and really evaluate that defense.
Our topic for today on Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell is retirement and job transitions, and our guest for today is Jim Jensen.
Yeah, Jim is with the Lennox Aberman Group. He's also one of the co-owners of the Chanhassen Dinner Theater. He's got a really interesting story. He's been on our show before, and he has talked to us a little bit about his own personal experience and his job transition. And because, Jim, that today's retirement looks so dramatically different than the retirement that our parents had.
Absolutely.
And you are the living example of this.
I think there are a lot of living examples of this out there today. I think my story is actually becoming much more common.
Right. I do. I agree with you totally. But the essence of it is, that you retired, and tell us a little bit about your particular job transition, because it was, at least initially, it was in the form of retirement. It doesn't look so much that way today, maybe.
It doesn't. When I was 52, I'd worked for a company for almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely loved what I did, but there were a lot of reasons why I thought it was time to move on. Probably the biggest reason is because there were 4 people in my group who were going to lose their jobs because we had hit a budget number.
Right.
We couldn't hit it. And when I really thought about what I wanted and I needed versus what my group needed and my company needed, I actually thought they were more important than me. So I went to my boss and told him that I thought it would be a good thing if I left and let's keep the other 4 people.
And your boss agreed.
His first thing was no way. But I went back to him and talked about it some more, and he ultimately said, if that's what you want to do, let's do it. And at 52, I had the financial ability to retire. I'd always had a great financial advisor.
Yep.
I think my wife Sandy and I had been very smart about how we invested and spent our money. And I thought it was off into retirement. What I didn't realize is that moving into retirement is not just about having the financial ability to do it.
Right.
Because you still need to feel valued. You still need to feel that there's some fulfillment in your life. And to be honest, sitting on the couch watching Oprah every day was not really it.
I've got to tell you, this happens almost every week in my practice where I'm sitting down with a couple, and one of their dilemmas is how they spend their time together, honestly. And this week, a couple that just retired this year, they're well into their 60s, but this guy who just retired said, well, I'm actually going to go back to work for just about 6 weeks. He's been a truck driver his whole life, and he's going to drive and haul grain during the harvest season. Right. And his wife's immediate comment was, well, that will be good because he won't be underfoot all day.
Oh.
Okay, and so, this is a couple that truly, truly loves each other. They're great together. It's fun just to be with them because you can see the chemistry between the two of them. But the truth of the matter is they're not used to spending 24/7.
Right.
And so to have a little break in the course of the year is a very, very positive thing. But the other thing, of course, that, as you talk about, that you are financially prepared for this, and so few people are financially prepared at 52 to do this. And one of the things that keeps them from doing it is that they lose their benefit packages.
Right.
And part of your financial prep was you'd figured that part out.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So, let's take this part, this slice of financial independence, that is at the height when we talk about being able to switch jobs. Now, many people would agree. If I can switch jobs at will, or I can retire at 52 and go out and look at something, that's a new definition for financial independence. So tell a little bit about the preparation, because I'm sure people are like, how in the world did you do that?
Well, when I think about, financial independence, it has a lot of parts to it. I think one part in today's environment is having the ability to change your situation.
Yep.
Whether that means you're going to change your job, change your company, or move out of a job and into retirement, or spend more time volunteering or doing different things like that. So unfortunately, I didn't do it all that well when I attempted it the first time. What I missed is how important it was that I actually did something that made me feel valued, and that would actually make me feel good about myself.
Sure.
And I missed that so much. The good news is I had pretty good awareness around it. I knew I had to do something.
Right.
And I ended up finding some wonderful things to do that aligned with the values that I have that I think are very important to me. One of them was going back to work with the Lennox Aberman Group as their CFO, because I'm a numbers guy. But it's a very flexible job, and I work with just wonderful people, and I really love what I do there.
Right.
But it is flexible.
Sure.
If it's a snowy day in the winter, I can work from home if I want to, and it's very nice to be able to do that. I joined the board of directors for the History Theater over in St. Paul.
Sure.
It's a volunteer thing, and it's a wonderful thing. And then we became part owners and on the board of directors of the Chanhassen Dinner Theater, which is one of the most amazing things I've ever done in my whole life.
And you're the CFO there as well.
Well, I'm a finance overseer, let's call it. They have a great financial director who is very receptive to some ideas I might have.
So basically, you filled your life back up again, and to the overflow spot again.
It's
pretty
wonderful.
much.
I also do some mentoring with people who are younger and have lots of talent, who I think can be great, and so I like to work with them too. So yeah, I'm busy now, and I love it. I have flexibility, variety. I do what I think I need to do when I think I need to do it, and it's terrific.
People, you mentioned earlier that one of the things going into retirement is what happens is people start feeling undervalued. They don't know what to do with themselves. Would you recommend people who are in that situation to do volunteer work as you have done, because it's really non-committal?
Volunteer work is really hard work. It just doesn't get you financial pay.
Okay.
So
it can be very committal, by the way, because those folks, I've done a fair amount myself, and boy, I tell you what, showing up and doing your homework's pretty crucial.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think the real thing is to really look inside yourself and figure out what's important to you, and what will it take to make you feel fulfilled. I think that's different for different people.
I have to inject one other story from this week, because I had a client that called who, right along the lines of what you're talking about, who said, we have been, they just both retired in the last year, and like so many people of our generation, Jim, really busy, really hardworking. They don't really want to or know how to sit down and relax much.
Right.
And so he said, I'd like to buy what he calls sugar bush land. Sugar bush land is, they've always been tapping trees as kind of a hobby, and he found a piece of ground that's got a bunch of maple trees on it, and they said, hey, we want to grow our maple syrup operation.
Right.
And will they make a little money out of it? Yeah. Will they work their tails off? Yes. Will they enjoy it enormously? Absolutely. This is another way of getting financial independence, is to say, what's the thing that I can afford to do?
Right.
And really make me happy at the same time. So
There's kind of a headline that I think about, and that is, number one, are you happy in what you're doing?
right.
Number two, are you significant in what you're doing?
Right.
And
right.
number three, are you successful in what you're doing?
Happy, significant, successful.
Yeah, and there's no line that says that the success of a person dies with a person, but the significance is what lives on.
Ooh, I like that.
And there's nothing wrong with being both significant and successful.
Right.
But if I had to really pick one, I'd probably be significant.
Oh, that's cool. Say that one again. The success
The success of a person dies with a person,
dies with a person.
but the significance of the person is what
Significance
lives
lives
on.
on. Very good. Okay, well, we've got Jim Jensen on with us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about kind of a new retirement look, how retirement might be different for all of us. So stay tuned. We've got some good stuff for you ahead here, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
Welcome back to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. I'm Kyle Zander alongside Scott Wardell. And our guest for today, Jim Jensen. We're talking about retirement and job transitioning.
Absolutely. And Jim's been on our show before, and he has got that unique ability to talk about his own personal experience as well as a broader experience that he gets from working with the Lennox Aberman Group, as well as, some of the other things that he's done along the way. But he is uniquely qualified to talk about, this situation. Ken Dykewald, one of my favorite authors, wrote the book The Power Years, and he puts a little subtext on it, by the way. It's The Power Years User's Guide to the Rest of Your Life. And one of the things that Ken does is he talks about the fact that retirement is going to be very different for the generation that's retiring now than the generation that that came before, including lots of job changes. And people, right now, our listeners, think about, for many of you, how many different jobs have you held through your entire life? And if you're not retired, what might be the retirement job? In the old mode of retirement, there was no such thing as a retirement job. Retirement meant you weren't working. But now retirement can mean very much an active working lifestyle. So what do you think, Jim? You did it. You've done it a couple times here recently.
Yeah.
So what do you think people are changing jobs so frequently?
Well, I think in terms of job change, you have to think about changes you might make within your company, changes you might make between companies. There are a lot of different kinds of job changes you make, including the one into the, quote, retirement job, which
Absolutely.
I really like that headline. There's actually a 2010 Department of Labor study that says that the baby boomers, on average, between ages 18 and 44, will hold 11 jobs.
Wow,
Now,
11.
11. Now, 7 of
that's a
those
lot.
are between 18 and 27, so this is kind of the college things or the younger things you end up doing. But that still leaves 4 between 28 and 44, which means about, on average, every 4 years, people change jobs. And I think there's really 2 reasons why that happens.
Sure.
The first reason is what I will call the involuntary one, where the company tells you you're going to change your job.
Yeah, exactly.
And that happens a lot nowadays, too often, I'm afraid. But it happens, I think, because of the changing world economy, because of all the pressures on the companies. I've had that happen to me. I actually had a job eliminated back a number of years ago. And, the only thing I can say is, ouch. You just don't ever think that's going to happen to you, but
Yeah.
it does. But what I realized very quickly on that one was that it was a business decision that had personal consequences.
Absolutely.
It wasn't a personal decision.
Yeah.
It's not that they didn't like me. It's not that they didn't want me.
It's so hard not to take it personally.
It is really hard, but it is the nature of business nowadays.
Right, and you and I have both seen a number of people go through those job changes a lot of times.
Yes.
And some people, and especially those that have experience with it, often look at it as opportunity. Because often they get, through reorganizations and job changes, they ended up getting promoted.
Yes.
Others, on the other hand, operate with a great deal of fear because their number one thing they're thinking about is not how can I turn, lemons into lemonade, but how can I keep from getting killed in this deal?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think the outcome is different depending upon your outlook.
Absolutely. I think if you go at it, if you have anger,
Right.
I think it's really hard to find what you're really looking for within or outside your company. I think if you go at it very thoughtfully and very emotionally controlled, I think you can find what you're looking for.
Right.
Not to say it's easy, but I think you can do it. The other type of job changes is the voluntary one.
Right.
And I'll be honest, I've had many more people walk in my office and tell me, you know what, I think I'm going to move to another company, than I've had call people in and tell them they were going to move to another
Good
company.
point. That's a good point.
So a lot of these job changes are voluntary, and we do that because of money. We might like a different kind of commute, a different kind of job, a different kind of environment, smaller town versus big town.
Right.
More upward mobility. There are a lot of reasons why people might want to make that job change. And
Right.
having the financial ability to make that change and do it positively from a position of strength is always smart. In my mind, anytime I try to make a change from a position of weakness,
Yeah.
it never works.
Right.
If I'm having an issue with my current job, I get my feet underneath me, get myself solid, get everything to be the way I want it to, and then I'll look at a change.
Absolutely, yeah. Position of strength, of course, from a financial standpoint, that almost always means a good cash reserve.
Yes.
And so that is a point of preparation for a lot of people. They got to figure out where they're going to get that money from. But also, I always warn people, and I encourage people to live their goals and live their dreams, but be prepared as they do it, so that if, in fact, they're going to leave a job, the old adage is make sure the other job is already in hand before you're leaving it.
Right.
But that's, of course, when it's within your control. When it's not within your control, then you've really got to be thinking about those benefit packages. And the benefit packages people always think about right out of the gate, and they should, is their health insurance.
Yes.
But, in this last go-around, due to the recession and people losing their jobs, their retirement package has also been something that has, it takes a hit on two different ways, right? On the one hand, they're not contributing to it anymore.
Yeah.
And, on the other hand, the markets have been wild and down and now back up and now down again, so they're in this roller coaster ride with the actual asset value, and they can't contribute. If you're contributing, some of this volatility can actually pay off over the long haul.
Right.
Can,
Yes.
doesn't, I didn't say it would, but yeah, exactly. So a lot of things for people to consider as they're going through that.
Yeah, I think bottom line on these job changes and how you actually manage them well is, first of all, expect it, and then secondly, plan for it.
Absolutely.
Don't be surprised by it.
Yeah.
What about those job changes leading up to retirement?
Well, I think there are things you can do in a job that well, one of the things that I see that people sometimes do as they get close to retirement, and I'm talking, 45 to 55. And
Absolutely.
I see this a lot, and I'll be honest, I felt some of it in my own heart too. And that is that as you get closer to the end of your working career, you get worried that you might do something wrong that will take this away.
Yeah.
And then what would you do if that happened? And I think too many people get a little defensive
Yeah.
in those times.
Sure.
They try to be so careful not to do the wrong thing that they forget to do the right thing.
Right, right.
And in fact, they have so much experience and so much knowledge, and what their companies really want them to do is put their best ideas out there and really move the business forward. And that's what they want. What we often give them is a defensive reaction.
It's the power of focus. So as you're talking about it, there's an old baseball analogy that the worst thing that a pitcher can ever have go through their head is, when they've got somebody on first base and they say to themselves, whatever I do here, don't create a double play. Well, that then becomes
Right.
the focus, whether focus is either negative or positive, but it's very controlling.
Yes.
And pitchers will tell you that's doom.
Right.
Well, what you're saying in the job scenario here is that if you start thinking about, what's the double play?
Right.
How could I really screw this up? You may actually end up there.
You will.
The power of focus is really, it's almost scary sometimes.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely.
The other thing I'll say here, too, it's something somebody told me once many years ago that was very smart. I asked her, what do you think you're going to do in retirement? And the answer was, the same things I do now, just in different proportions.
Right.
So right now, maybe she was spending 10% on volunteer time. In retirement, she might spend 30. Right now, she's spending 20% with her kids. She might spend 40. She's spending 60%, if I did my math or whatever it is there.
Yeah.
On work, she might take that down to 20.
What's great about that, Jim, is that means that she's already living in alignment.
Yes.
Because she must have evaluated both her principles and her values in order to get to this spot. But
Yeah.
she's just overwhelmed probably,
Yes.
which, that's pretty common to be
isn't?
overwhelmed. Yeah, who isn't?
Yeah.
So it's like I'm doing the right things. I'm just doing a little too many of them or too much of them.
Right.
And that's one of the things that kind of leads into another piece as people make job transitions. People ask me all the time. I get emails and I get questions from people. Tell me a little bit about owning this orchard, because that sounds so cool, and when I retire I'd like to do something similar. Well, they're doing the right thing, frankly, because they're doing a little bit of their homework. But I notice that they almost always have made it a little bit more ideal, a little bit more romantic than it actually is, because it's an enormous amount of work.
Hard work too, isn't it, Scott?
But and I absolutely love it. But I think that people, they don't understand when they see the apples on the trees, all the steak pounding and the sweat pouring down in the summer. So doing their research
Yes.
is really, really important. The other thing is that people get tired of their own job because of the very things that you said, because they've got too much of it.
Yes.
It's what's that really rich chocolatey pie they serve at Perkins? That it is just like with whipped cream on rich pie, and it is awesome, right?
Yeah.
But trying once to eat 2 pieces of it,
Right.
it's just too much.
Too much.
And so oftentimes the skill set that people have, the experience they have, is very, very appropriate for the job they've got. They've just got a little too much.
Right. But what I think is interesting about the Orchard, and what's interesting and common about the Chanhassen Dinner Theater,
Yes.
I think both you and I do that because we really think we are doing something that matters to other people.
Without question.
And it's hard work. The Chan's hard work.
Right.
And if people really understood what goes into putting a production like that out, it's
Oh, my
amazing
gosh.
what goes into it.
Oh,
But all I have
unbelievable.
to do is walk around the theater when it's full and just look at the happy people, and my heart grows 3 sizes.
absolutely.
And
Well,
that's why you do it.
And it's the whole thing about operating out of a sense of passion and vision that says, and I've told you the story before about this 16-year-old that pulled me aside at the end of a day at the Orchard and said to me, I just have to tell you something. And I said, what's that? And he said, my grandparents kind of dragged me here. He didn't use the word kicking and screaming, but I didn't want to come here. But this was awesome.
That's great.
Well, you hear that stuff, and it just fuels your energy, because that's the experience that we're trying to create there.
Yes.
And going back to our topic today is that if people find that particular career that they're passionate about, that's likely to become they're part of a wonderful retirement piece
Right.
for
and,
them.
And jobs are tough. They call them jobs because they are work.
Yes.
And there's always a part of the job that isn't your favorite part of the job.
Right.
That always happens. I've never had a job that was perfect, but I've always been able to find the thing in the job that I really get excitement around and that carries me through the tough times. And I think that's the kind of thing that if people think, while I'm working, what are the things that I really get juiced up about in my job?
Yeah.
And how can I find things that will make me feel that way as I transition to a new job and or into retirement?
Absolutely. And of course, an important part of this is that for many people, and now I'm going to just go financial on you, for many people, they're going to look at, well, how much money am I going to get from Social Security? How much money can I depend on consistently from my retirement savings? If they have a pension, how much money will come from that? And for many, the way for them to get what they want during retirement is to have another source of income, especially during those early years.
Right.
You mentioned earlier that flexibility that you've created in your own situation. So oftentimes people, when they really lay out their goals and their dreams, say, I know I'm probably going to have some kind of a job while I'm retiring, but I got to have flexibility because I want to go skiing. I want to
Right.
take this time off, or I want to go to Arizona, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And so they're going to many people are going to need the income, but they've got to get the finances worked out as well as the transition and getting themselves in a place of hopefully great passion and reward.
Yeah, money is not everything, but it is an important thing.
It is an important
You-
piece
you
of the
need to have that in
preparation.
place. You do.
Exactly. And if you don't have it in place, then the other piece doesn't come so well. So, okay, very good. We've got Jim Jensen on us. We've got a lot more to come. We're going to talk more about the new retirement picture, and also a model to help people make some wise investment decisions.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Nearly 3 million members look to Thrivent Financial for Lutherans to help them achieve their financial goal. Nearly 3 million people know that Thrivent Financial is committed to excellence in financial services and caring for others. Get to know Thrivent Financial and the quality of products and services they can offer you. In Minnesota, you have a host of representatives to help you with your financial needs. Contact your local Thrivent representatives Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731 or call 1-855-346-4332. Registered representatives for securities offered through Thrivent Investment Management Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. Scott, deal of the day.
Absolutely. Well, today, because we're talking about the new retirement and jobs that people may hold during the retirement and how this might really be a very, very different retirement than maybe our parents had, or certainly the generation before this. We're giving away a really good book. It's called The Power Years. It's written by Ken Dykewald. We have 20 copies, so I encourage people to pick up the phone and call right now, and I'm going to give that number one more time. It's 1-855-346-4332. So the 855 is a toll-free number, and the rest of the numbers actually are FIN IDEA, IDEA. So it's Financial Idea is what we're using as our little acronym there, but it is 1-855-346-4332, and that's for the book, The Power Years, by Ken Dykewald. It's a great book. So
we talked about that earlier today in the show, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We did. There's a lot of Ken Dykewald, by the way, is a demographer, and he studies the trends in age groups. And, of course, that got him to really start to talk about what's happening to our aging population, how is this going to affect business, hey, how's it going to affect the individual, and how's it going to affect our economy overall. And he's done a ton of research, but it's a really interesting book, and it's well written, so as you pick it up, or if you call in and get one, very frankly, I think you're going to find it to be very, very enlightening. So we have Jim Jensen on the air with us today. Jim is really gone through this very kind of retirement to new job transition. And we've been talking about different kinds of work, how to prepare for a transition to a retirement job. I love putting those two words in the same sentence because it kind of breaks the paradigm. But Jim, also, let's just talk a little bit about volunteering. How have you balanced these two goals of volunteering and working?
Well, again, just to be clear, volunteering is hard work without financial compensation.
Right.
There's some wonderful opportunities out there to volunteer, and there's some wonderful things that need us to contribute our time because they can't actually afford to pay us.
Right.
That said, there's nothing wrong with getting paid for work we might do in our retirement job, and for those who are fortunate enough not to really need that extra money, well, you can always donate it to somebody who does need that money.
Absolutely.
So there are lots of wonderful things we can do. I try to find a nice balance. I've always tried to find a good balance between contributing my time and being paid for my time. I've been a mentor for a number of years with an organization called Mentium up in the cities that I just absolutely love doing, both because I think it really helps some people be successful, even more successful than they might have been, but because it also wakes me up a little bit, because a lot of the things I need to do personally to be successful are buried back in the back of my brain.
Sure.
And when I help somebody, and I'm not hooked in emotionally to their problem. I mean, sometimes it'd be an emotional challenge with a job or a boss or something, and their emotions are running wild. And when emotions are running wild, it's very hard to come to good conclusions and make good decisions.
Right. I'm
not emotionally tied into that.
Yep.
And so I can stand back, much like you can do as a financial advisor with somebody, and help them make a thoughtful, meaningful decision, and that's what I do.
Right.
So that to me has been wonderful. I love doing the mentoring. The History Theater over in St. Paul, being on their board, that's also a volunteer opportunity.
Yep.
And they both align perfectly with what I'm trying to do in my life, which is to contribute some of my skills back and to actually feel valued for what I do.
Absolutely. That's I can hear it in your voice. I can see it in your face that it is really.
I love it.
It's something that really gives you enormous energy.
Do you think it's important for somebody, if they're going to be doing volunteer work, to be doing it in an area that they're passionate about, not just volunteering for volunteering's sake?
If I have my choice, I would have everybody do anything they do in an area that they care about.
Right.
I think particularly volunteering, though, volunteering can be hard. And if your heart is in it or there's a personal reason why you're tied to it, I think that's what you want to do. So if you can find that, I think that's great.
Because I would assume that, if this is, if you're going into retirement and you're doing it, the retirement technically is, your time off, I would assume. So if you're doing something that you're not passionate about during that time, I would assume that'd be just an inward struggle the entire time going, what am I doing?
It could be.
I'm not enjoying this at all.
It could
Right.
be.
And people do enjoy it for a variety of reasons. So, I know people that if you really were to dig down and say, why is it? There was a group I was working with in Burnsville, and frankly, they brought me in to help them facilitate a session to get their vision, because most of the people on this board were extremely frustrated with the direction of the board. And so I laid it on the table, and I said, why do you people continue to meet? And they said, they looked at me and blinked and were a little shocked at the question, because I could tell they were so frustrated with the direction, and they said, well, because we really like each other, and we really like being together. And I said, well, just think how fun this would be then if you actually had a clear mission and vision. So that's what we worked on for them. Yeah.
And I think volunteering is kind of like work. There are always going to be parts of everything you like, and some parts you don't like. I love driving my car. I don't like putting gas in it. There you go.
Right.
And I think that's fine as long as you're aware that you don't let the things that bother you in something overshadow the things that you love in something.
Absolutely. Well, let's transition here just a little bit, Jim. You work at the Lennox Aberman Group with people who would do a lot with behavioral finance.
Yes.
And our listeners are going to really, I think, enjoy this part of our discussion today. But, when you think of Doug Lennox's book, Financial Intelligence, how, when people are approaching their retirement, how does the content of that book and the direction of that book play into this kind of decision?
Sure. Behavioral finance is really just a specific application of something we call the alignment model.
Okay.
And it's an application of the alignment model to how we make financial decisions.
Sure.
And the alignment model is simply, and just think of a triangle.
Okay.
At the top of the triangle, we have our moral compass. And that really defines who do we ideally want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually two parts to that. One part are the principles, and we actually all share 4 principles.
Okay.
We have them in common, and they are integrity, accountability, compassion, and forgiveness.
Okay, so no one would dispute that, is what you're
It's
saying.
hard to
basically.
argue against those
Yeah,
4.
right.
And the nice thing about it,
I'm not for compassion. No.
I'm anti-compassion. But the nice thing is, at a time when we all seem to want to separate, and
Right.
go to our corners, isn't
Yeah.
it nice to know, and I just met Kyle today, isn't it nice to know if I behave this way and he behaves that way with me, that we'll actually find some common ground.
Absolutely.
I like that. I
Yeah.
think that's good. The other
Kind of in Scott's corner, though. I'm not a big compassion guy.
What a tough crowd, Jim.
It is a tough crowd. The other part of the moral compass are our values, our individual values that are important to us.
Right.
And at the Lennox Aberman Group, we actually have an exercise that people can go through, and it's a process. It's 51 cards, each
Yeah.
with a value, and you exclude cards and come down to the 5 that actually are your values. We all have values, but it's really hard for us to articulate them.
Absolutely.
And therefore, we can't access them and use them. So we help people do that within the moral compass. So on the top, your moral compass. Lower left are your goals.
Yeah,
Those are your financial goals, which I know, Scott, you help people with a lot,
absolutely.
as well as their life goals, their relationship goals. It's all the things they want to do in life.
Yep.
And on the lower right point of the triangle are your actions and your behaviors and your decisions.
Yep.
And the idea of the model is if you can make decisions and complete actions that are aligned both with your goals and with who you ideally want to be, even in and especially during times of high emotion,
Yep.
then by and large you're going to do just fine.
Yep. And you know, in sports, people talk about being in the zone.
Yeah.
And when everything just sort of clicks.
Right.
And my experience with what you just talked about is that you can get your life in the zone.
Yes.
Where things just click.
Yes.
On the other hand, we've all experienced that that time when we've done something that we weren't terribly proud of. Maybe we got a little too angry.
Yes.
You know.
Lacked compassion.
Right.
As an example.
Exactly. You've got, you know, something upset us or whatever it happens to be, and we use a phrase. I don't feel like myself today.
Right.
And that's actually when someone says, I think that's a point of great reflection. That says, you know, that means I know who I'm supposed to be if I say I don't feel like myself today. So now give us a little bit of relationship of how this goes then into the retirement picture. How do we use this?
Well, I'll use my own example.
Okay, good.
When I went to, quote, retire,
Yeah.
it was very clear that I really didn't stop and think about what's in my set of values and who am I.
Yep.
What am I really trying to be, ideally, in retirement? And it was clear I didn't really have any goals for what I wanted to accomplish. And it certainly wasn't watching Oprah sitting on the couch.
Right.
And my emotions, of course, were running wild. I woke up the third day of my, quote, retirement and laid in bed at 5 in the morning and thought, you know, nobody really cares if I get up today.
Yeah, wow.
And my emotions were soundly in play at that point.
Yeah, right.
You know, so when I think about lacking my moral compass in place, lacking my goals and high emotions, it's no surprise that the wheels were all flying off.
Right.
You know, but I had enough awareness,
Yep.
and I had enough good people around me and I had a model, using the alignment model, to really step back and say, what is important to me? And
Yep.
what do I want to accomplish? And how do I get control of these emotions? And start working my way out of this. It started with mentoring. It went to Lennox Gaberman. It went to the History Theater. It went to the Chan.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something, I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
There are more things I have,
Right.
but now I'll do it in a very thoughtful, emotionally controlled way.
And, you know, Jim, you are one of the most centered people I know. And so what I love about your story, because I know you personally, is if you, of all people, can get off kilter through, you know, emotions tugging at you, how much easier is it for those? I mean, this is something you've practiced
Right.
during your life.
Right.
You still, when the emotions started to hit you, and so I take a look at, you know, what's going on in the market and how that affects people emotionally, how they lose track of what their actual retirement goals are.
Yep.
You know, you were practiced at it.
Right.
You know, and what you said was, I needed some help. I needed some people to, you know, kind of talk to me and help me with this process we're going to talk about in a minute, and that's the 4 R's.
Right. Well, it's an interesting thing that the way we're wired in our brains
Right,
is to be
hardwired.
hardwired to be emotional first and thoughtful second.
Right.
We're much quicker. We make emotional decisions in 12 milliseconds. It takes 40 milliseconds to make thoughtful decisions.
Yeah.
You know, we can multitask on the emotional side. I can be excited and scared at the same time, but I
Yeah.
can only have one thought.
Yes.
So all we can manage in our head is one thought. So emotion wins.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, emotion cheats because our brain actually kicks out a drug called dopamine
Yeah.
that actually inhibits clear thinking when we're emotionally charged.
And you think of that just on a broader scale for one moment, and I know I digress on this, but we are bombarded with information that is emotionally charged, and so even politically, all we hear is emotion. We don't really hear much in the way of thoughtful stuff, and so the politicians are trying to grab our emotions and not our thoughts, very honestly.
Yes.
Because they're not giving us information. They're giving us reasons why we should, you know, hate this or not do this.
Right. Well, open the paper this morning. I didn't have a chance to do it this morning. And look at how many headlines are emotionally charged.
Right.
That sells newspapers. That gets our attention. Where
Right.
we are.
Let's be smarter than that.
Yes.
Let's really be smarter. So at any rate, we've got Jim Jensen on, and when we come back, Jim, I'm going to have you give us a quick review of the 4 R's. This is important stuff to help people really manage their way to retirement, honestly. It's really some very sound principles here. So stay tuned. We got some good stuff coming up in the last quarter hour of the show.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
You're listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. I'm Kyle Zander alongside Scott Wardell, and our guest for today is Jim Jensen. We're talking about retirement and job transitioning, and we're going to talk about the 4 R's. It doesn't have to do with retirement, reduce, reuse, and recycle, right?
No, it doesn't.
No,
not
okay.
at all. But Jim's going to give us a model here. So quick review, if you would, Jim, about the 4 R's, and then relate it to managing people, helping them manage on their way to retirement.
Well, the 4 R's kind of tie back to the alignment model, moral compass, goals, and how you are actually going to behave. And what the 4 R's do is when you're trying to make a decision, this is a very thoughtful, constructive way to make that decision. The 4 R's are, first of all, recognize, secondly, reflect, third, reframe,
Okay.
and fourth is to respond.
Okay.
So relative to how we make retirement decisions, first of all, recognize, first R, that your emotions are in play. It's a
Right.
scary time. You don't know what comes left. You have a sense of loss from whatever you're moving away from. No matter how much it drove you crazy every day, you'll miss the people, you'll miss your desk, you'll miss that terrible coffee.
Right.
But recognize that your emotions will be in play. Secondly, really reflect on your moral compass and your goals. Figure out what is it that is important to me and what am I going to try to accomplish as I move into retirement.
Right.
And for some people who are fortunate enough to have grandkids, maybe that is a focus that they want to really spend more time with the grandkids. How wonderful. Take them fishing,
Sure.
It's a great thing to do. Third, reframe your thinking so that what you're planning to do and how you're going to approach things is in alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, actually respond. What are you going to do? Because nothing changes until you actually do something.
Absolutely.
So that's how I think about it applying.
And so it's really a technique to get your thoughtful part of your brain or your conscious mind to
Yeah.
kind of overrule the emotions.
Yes.
That's really what we're talking about here.
Yes, and remember that when the emotions are running wild, that's some pretty deep water. And being able to be aware of the fact that you're emotionally charged, most of the mistakes I've made in my life and most of the stupid things I've said or done are all tied back to when my emotions are out of control and I just wasn't aware enough to stop, calm down.
Right.
That's why I think God invented the draft key on our computers. The save button.
Right.
I've written some things and I saved it, and the next day I'm so happy I didn't send it.
Right.
And we all do that, but that's what emotions do to you.
Right.
So think about the 4 R's as kind of a personal draft key.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're talking about moving towards retirement, one of the things that people are just so frightened about is whether or not their money is going to last.
Right.
I always say there's 2 phases to retirement. The first phase is how long will my money last, and the second phase is how long will I last.
Right.
And in terms of the money last, that's one of the big drivers. So, Jim, when you think about the volatile markets you've had already during your, early retirement and then going back to work, what effects has this had on your job transition and how you go about thinking about this?
Well, this has been an interesting emotional roller coaster for everybody who's listening. Unfortunately, the answer for me, it hasn't had any impact at all. And I've been very fortunate with that. But it's based on something that I've learned in working with financial intelligence. There's a study put up by a company called Delbar.
Yep.
And this actually looks at a 20-year average return in the market
Yep.
versus what a mutual fund equity holder actually earns.
Right.
And over the last 20 years, ending in 2010, the market actually produced a return of just over 9%.
Right.
On average over time. So forget the recent,
Yeah.
over time. compared to what the average equity mutual fund owner made, and that was 4%.
Right.
So what happened to the 60% in there? Where did that 5% go? What the study has concluded is that a big piece of that is based on how we have emotionally made decisions, financial decisions.
Right.
So the market runs up to a new high. Our feet start to dance. We couldn't be more excited, and so we dump all our money in the market.
Right.
And aren't we happy?
And people, when they fill out their 401ks, they get a report that says, oh, this particular fund did 20%, this one did 8%, and they say, oh, I want to put more money in that one that did 20%. Yeah, exactly.
So they get excited, they move to things like that. Then the market goes down.
Yep.
And the market goes down, emotions run wild. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And they pull their money out of the market.
Right.
This is a strategy of buying high and selling low.
Exactly the opposite of what you should do,
Exactly.
but your emotions are guiding those.
Right. That's what emotions tell you to do. That's why a financial advisor has been critical to me and how I've managed through it, because they're the voice of reality, and they're calm, and they can talk me down when I need to be talked down. So my own particular case, when I left my job on December 14th, 2007, the market was at 13,340, the Dow Jones.
Yowzer.
Yeah, pretty good. It then proceeded.
Timing is not your strength, is it, Jim?
Well, I like to think that once I left, it all fell apart.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm not sure anybody would agree with that. I'm getting a few looks here in the booth, but
Right.
But then it dropped to a low of 6,547 on March 9th, 2009.
Right.
So that's more than half the value of the market went away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, emotions told me to panic.
Right.
But my knowledge around financial intelligence and knowing how to deal through this, knowing that my emotions are running wild, and talking to my advisor said, no, that's not the right thing to do. This money is for retirement.
Right.
My grandfather was 99 when he passed. My grandmother was 97. My father, when he passed, was just about 96. My mother's 95 and doing well.
Wow.
The world has stuck with me for a long time. And this
Drive carefully, my friend.
I will drive carefully. Yes, yeah. And so this money is for a long period of time.
Right.
And so what it does on a day-to-day or even year-to-year, and to be honest, decade-to-decade basis, doesn't really matter all that much. It matters.
Right.
But I just have to keep some sight that this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. So, you know, even when we went to buy the Chan, my advisor could identify some stock that was actually at a pretty high price at the time.
Sure.
And so that's where we got the money to do that. So again, speaking to the value of a financial advisor and diversification, where there was always a smart place to get money.
Right.
And there was, and that made that work. Otherwise, you know, my heart would have probably said, I don't think you can do it.
Right.
And what a loss that would have been. So now where are we? Well, when I actually put some notes together, this was Thursday, by the way.
Right.
The market was Wednesday, 11,500.
Yeah.
As of yesterday, it closed at 10,771. But even at 10,771, I'm back to 81% of what I had when I left my job on
Right.
December 14th, 2007. As of Wednesday, I was back to 86%.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
So the point is I didn't lock in my losses by selling low in a panic time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that some people might not choose to sell when the market's low or move some things around. But it needs to be a thoughtful, constructive decision, not an emotional panic.
Absolutely. And I'm going to throw out a new phrase. Maybe some people have heard along the way, but in the past, with studies like Dalbar, they have said things like, well, the person who just did purely buy and hold came out far better than those that did the opposite. I mean, that's fairly obvious, is if you were to sell at the bottom and buy at the top, you're not going to get a very good rate of return. I mean, that's pretty simple.
It's going to hurt.
But the thing that I think people have to do today, because we do have some different dynamics in the market, and I'm going to call it buy and manage.
Mm-hmm.
You have to buy and manage. Mm-hmm. And does manage mean sell at the bottom? Absolutely not. But early we started the show with get some defense in your portfolio. Most people do not know how to do that, or they're using a relatively old school model for creating defense. So if you don't have any defense in your portfolio, or you're not sure if you have defense in your portfolio, if you don't have broad diversification, I highly encourage our listeners to pick up the phone, call that number, and you can ask for the book. I hope you do that we're talking about today, and that's called The Power Yours with Ken Dykewald. But you could also ask for a free consultation to sit down with one of us and have a review of your overall situation to make sure that you have enough defense in the portfolio. And that number again is 1-855-346-4332. And again, if you call that number, leave us a message. It is a recording. Give us your name and your address so we can mail the book out to you. A phone number if you'd like a phone call, so we can do this very, very thing that we're talking about here today, is to help people make really good, sound financial decisions.
One other thing I'll share, Scott, is in addition to having a cash position, which we always need to have that for emergencies, there are times when you will had that emergency and or that thing you really want to do, and the cash gets down a little lower than you want it.
Right.
You also need to have an advisor who's going to work with you to identify where will that next piece of cash come from, and where is the right place to get it. And again, my advisor was absolutely perfect in helping me do that.
Right.
And I, being recovering actuary, I thought I knew where I wanted to get it.
Yeah.
And in fact, he said, well, you could, but there's actually a better place over here.
Absolutely. That's the combination of what we call the harvest strategy along with a really healthy cash reserve.
Scott and Jim, we got about 60 seconds left before we have to wrap things up here for Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. What are some things that you hoped that people can take away from today's show?
Well, I guess I've got three things. I always seem to. First of all, manage and control both your financial and your personal future. Take control. You'll be controlled or you'll be in control.
Absolutely.
My advice, be in control. Secondly, be thoughtful and purposeful when your emotions want to take you to the dark side. And lastly, utilize the knowledge and the stabilizing effect of a really good financial advisor. That has been critical for me.
Perfect. I have three quick ones as well. Number one is plan, then monitor and adjust. Number two is get good diversification and get some defense. Make sure you've got it. And the third thing is run several worst-case scenarios. Find out if you're okay in the worst case, and then you'll have confidence there as well. So thanks for being with us here today, Jim. You're always great to have on the show.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. I'm Kyle Zander. Have a great rest of your day.
We hope you've enjoyed the past hour of Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. Join us again next week for Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell on KMRS Morris.